Hello and welcome to Reroll. My name is Angus Morrison and today I have something a little bit different for you. Anyone who's stuck around this channel long enough will know that I harp on and on about development not ending at release, about the fluidity of the finished product being something that differentiates gaming from other media. We have patches, DLC, expansions, things that keep a game alive and changing in a way that books or films do not. The state of a game months down the line is often quite different to that on launch day. Increasingly, this is true prior to release as well, where once development was seen as a closed shop, the increase in crowdfunding and community engagement has seen indie developers playing their cards long before launch. Paid access to beta testing is coming to serve as a source of funding in itself, to afford the devs an army of willing beta testers and to permit the community a voice in the game's future. Unlike DLC, however, early testing is not amenable to review. Alphas and betas are sold on the understanding that the game is unfinished, imperfect, and quite possibly buggy as all hell. The saying alpha is alpha exists for good reason, and by the time a review is finished uploading, it would already be out of date. But we can look at the systems that are in place at these early stages and judge from that whether we feel they have promise, whether the game will be one to watch, whether we see a bright future in the bug-ridden murk. We can now chart the development of a game from its earliest phases into its old age, to see how they grow and change, and to engage with the creation of a new product. And so, without further ado, let's take a first look at the paid alpha of Cube World. Cube World is in development over at Picroma, a two-person team founded in 2010. Its public alpha was made available on the 6th of July and can be yours to try for €15, though due to the game's popularity and a series of mysterious DDoS attacks, the store is being taken down intermittently. Cube World, as you might have guessed, is of the voxel-based, infinite procedurally generating Minecraft lineage, but not simply another clone. It is at its heart an RPG, taking inspiration from Zelda, Secret of Mana, Monster Hunter and Warcraft, among others. Think mages, rogues, dwarves, goblins, all in a decidedly polygonal setting which is yours to explore as you will. And I can say now that Cube World is spectacularly polished for an early build. It used to be that an alpha was the bare bones of a game, on the very edge of playability, a basic playground used to test the game's major systems. Cube World, however, is well fleshed out and incredibly stable. I suffered a mere 3 crashes during recording for this video, primarily a result of gratuitous alt-tabbing, and it runs smooth as silk. I could certainly find cause for complaint if it was released as is, but as an alpha test, Cube World is ahead of the curve. Another break from the image of the alpha as being held together by spit and glue are the visuals, and this is what will be selling most people on the game. Cube World looks incredible. I have never seen a voxel-based game in which the landscapes appear so organic. The highest peaks arc down into arêtes and ridges, in turn rolling into foothills, before finally sweeping out into broad river valleys meandering through the landscape. And these are subzones within much, much larger lands. Where Minecraft's early beta had yet to see the introduction of biomes, Cube World already boasts greenlands, snowfields, deserts, jungles, firelands, and oceans, with more in the works, linked by procedurally generated roads cutting through vast swathes of land. The aesthetic is simple. Blocks have no texture beyond simple colour, smoothly lit so as to paint the landscape in a great spectrum of hues. Far from being bland or empty, the minimalistic approach has enhanced the world's natural flow, relying on geological architecture to add visual interest and break up the scene. It's a bold choice for which Picroma will reap the benefits. Interestingly, the current build has no soundtrack, and to trek through a vast, monotone desert, dwarfed by mountains and canyons, stumbling upon oases and tracing azure rivers through the dunes with nothing but footsteps for company, is to have quite a moving experience. Majesty is a quality infrequently attributed to voxels, but here it's a fitting description. Even the minimap is beautifully rendered in voxel form. It is a pity that emptiness continues to be a property of those areas supposedly most populous. The cities, which form the centre point of each land, are bursting with market stalls, training dummies, inns and shops, with nary a soul around to use them, but this kind of set dressing is almost sure to follow in later builds. The only major graphical issue I found was the fact that at night it gets very, very dark. Pitch black, to the point where it is vital that this be fixed in the near future. It also seems to be the case that the world map, beautiful though it is in daytime, shares the global light source, and when the sun sets, so too the map becomes invisible. It is possible to set the clock back to morning, but this can only be done by talking to an innkeeper in one of the central towns. Should you be caught out in the wild when the sun goes down, you're in for a long night. On the whole, however, Cube World's procedurally generated landscapes are a work of art. The focus for Cube World is very much on exploration. It is in fact marketed as an exploration RPG. Each new world is generated at random, or according to a specific seed number, and the player is for the most part left to uncover the secrets of the land of their own volition. Do not go in expecting to be guided in so early a phase of development. You are dropped in the middle of the woods, or tundra, or desert, or ocean, and left to get on with it. In many ways, I'd like this to stay. Being plonked in the centre of an alien land without knowing the very rules of the game recaptured some of that feeling. The sense of genuine wonder and adventure that accompanied the first open world games you ever played. Of course, the results can be unpredictable. At present, monsters are distributed through a zone without particular regard for level, and, as is the way with procedural generation, you might end up in the middle of a hornet's nest. Literally. But this sense of randomness is part of what makes a great adventure. I spent the first few hours of play avoiding roving bands of orcs on the roads and fleeing from mobs of angry beetles. A particularly memorable moment saw me fall upon a lone alpaca with glee, only for a pair of undead warriors to come steamrolling through the woods, steal my kill, and try and claim my skin as a cape. There are quests of sorts, randomly generated each day and marked on your map by a pair of crossed swords. At present, quests come in only the one variety, to hunt down and kill the boss monster of a particular installation, be they catacombs, castles, or a more open overworld dungeon. They seem intended to serve more as gentle incentive to explore than a structured mission, but I feel Cube World will need to introduce more variety by the time of its release. While exploration for its own sake is an admirable goal, there has to be the promise of actually finding something novel to hold people's attention. For those of you going into Cube World for the first time, it'll help to know that enemy nameplates roughly follow Warcraft tradition in that the colour of the name reflects the mob's difficulty, white is trivial, blue normal, orange challenging, and red oh for the love of God run, while the colour of the health bar indicates how it will react to your presence. Blue is friendly, green is neutral but attackable, and red will go for your jugular. Even this, however, is sometimes inaccurate. Combat is not yet properly balanced, with some enemies, such as skeletons, being able to soak up inordinate amounts of damage while hitting like freight trains. Monsters are prone to sticking in groups too, which provides healthy challenge as you level up, but at the start is something of a trial by fire. Your first hours will be spent craftily picking off stragglers to fill an XP bar which is overly large, turning the opening levels into a bit of a grind. But this is a matter of balance, not one of mechanics, and I'm sure it'll be adjusted repeatedly as development progresses. Mechanically, Cube World is mostly sound, if not wildly original. A surprisingly detailed character creation screen allows you to select between the fantasy staples of warrior, mage, rogue, and ranger, and it was the latter two I tried before settling on the ranger. The classes, like the monsters, are in need of tweaking, and the rogue at present has a tendency to be shredded like paper. Combat is much more dynamic than we've come to expect from the genre, requiring graceful evasion followed by swift counter, in the form of normal and special attacks bound to the left and right mouse buttons. The flow of combat is helped no end by some really smooth animation work, a far cry from Minecraft's Duplo avatars, and leagues ahead of even the more recent voxel-based games such as Ace of Spades. And the fighting's not easy. The dodge button is very much required at those lower levels, and getting to grips with the attack patterns of your enemies is a central aspect of the game. There are frustrating encounters involving particularly fast-hitting enemies that don't break between swings. In these instances, dodging doesn't provide the necessary breathing space for your counterattack, and the fights can devolve into button spamming. But once again, metrics such as attack speed and enemy health should come in for adjustment at a later date, and in general having to balance attack with evasion should prevent what is essentially a two-button system wearing thin rather quickly. Additional moves are unlocked through each class's skill tree, bringing familiar archetypal abilities into the fray. My ranger, for example, was able to kick enemies away and leap backwards from the fight. In theory, you can put infinite points into these skills, a concept I've still yet to quite wrap my head around. There is no level cap. You're able to go on leveling for as long as you play, but your power, which dictates the gear you can equip and, well, how powerful you are, increases asymptotically. Each level up results in a successively smaller increase in power. It seems to me a rather artificial attempt to extend the lifetime of the game. Perhaps in an infinite world, it makes sense to have players level infinitely, to have no endgame when the goal is exploration. But I just don't know how rewarding it's going to be leveling up to receive a negligible increase in power. It rather defeats the point of leveling up. Indeed, the skills and progression are where my main concerns lie with Cube World, as two of the skills include climbing and swimming, necessary 5-point prerequisites to unlock hang gliding and sailing. I understand why they have been included. The ability to scale rock faces and dive into underground lakes naturally gels with a focus on exploration, but at present the skills have little discernible use. Climbing, for example, is rendered obsolete by the fact that most mountains and cliffs can be walked or jumped up, avoiding any sheer faces that might be present. The player will come to resent expending hard-earned skill points on an unnecessary skill in order to unlock the more enticing hang glider. The swimming skill, which improves swim speed and diving ability, suffers from a problem shared by the Elder Scrolls Oblivion's athletics skill. No one wants a character that can't run or swim well. Having to spend points on becoming a functional human being when you should be building an epic hero is not ideal. Cube World speaks to me as a game that could have a very strong multiplayer community, even in its current state. The freeform exploration and unpredictability of an infinite, procedurally generated world will be all the more fun with people at your side to share in the adventure. If Pichroma include modding support at a later date, the potential of Cube World will be simply enormous. For the single player in Cube World's alpha, gameplay is rather bland, having skill trees that hamper rather than foster exploration, and combat which is poorly balanced. But alpha is alpha. There are months yet for reworking, tweaking, and polishing, and even a little attention to these issues will help bring out the strengths of a combat system far more dynamic than we're used to seeing in such games. For the moment, Pichroma have created a beautiful canvas which is simply bursting with promise, and come beta we'll see what they can really do with it. Cube World is one to watch.